Welcome everyone to another episode of the Old Timers Comic Book Show, where we, the hosts, are not old, but the comic books most certainly are. Joining me, as always, my fellow old timers, we have the Professor and we have the 13th Crusader.
Hey, what's up,
Way!
Johnny?
Yo.
Hey, what's up, guys?
I'm feeling really great that nobody had a rocket drop on their heads yesterday, so we're all good.
Good.
Yeah.
I have to tell you a funny story. I was in one of my local comic book shops yesterday, picking up some stuff. I picked up maybe a little bit too new for this show, but I picked up Batman 655, which is the first Grant Morrison issue.
Nice.
Yeah, because
Nice.
I'm such a regular customer, he managed to knock £3 whole off. So thank you, the Dahl Knight, for selling me the book at £22 instead of 25. But the thing that made me laugh was that as I was going in, like 4 kids were coming out. We're talking like teenage kids and stuff. And I was like, whoa, teenagers buy comic books. Went in and the guy was like, do you know what they were in here for? I was like, comic books, maybe, just as a guess. He says, yeah, they wanted some old comics. And I said, okay, so you've got you've got racks and racks of back issues. Surely you must have done. He said, do you know what they think old comics are? I was like, surprise me. Books from the 80s. I was like, well, that is, it could be.
We talk about them on the podcast.
It's like,
I prefer to call them classics.
yeah, well, yeah, that's a shout. But I mean, it got me thinking, because the 80s, 1981, that's like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
40 years.
We are old.
Yeah.
We are old. We're gonna have to change that byline on the podcast.
Hell no. We're only as young as the comics we read. In that case, we're about 56. All right.
Legends live on forever.
Woo-hoo. Yeah.
It's true.
Legends. That's what we are. Legends. All right. Okay. So books around this time. This time around, we're talking of the dreaded dum dum dum. The cliffhanger. Now, normally, I don't know what you guys feel, but normally cliffhangers, are they a good thing in comic books? What do you think? Before we get into specifics,
It depends on how they're done. I think every book these days, if it's like a part 2 of 3 or a part 4 of 5, that penultimate issue always ends where you kind of feel like the mid breaking point of a 66 Batman episode where are they gonna survive? Possibly.
Yeah.
How are they gonna get out of this one?
Cool. That's a shout.
Yeah, and then we talked about like cliffhanger endings. So those serials that probably our fathers used to watch in the matinees in the theater.
Yeah. The Flash Gordons and stuff like that. Yeah.
Where every episode the hero supposedly dies, and then the next episode you go back next week and you see something you didn't see before, and so he's survived. So that's So the cliffhanger idea is the kind of the best use of the cliffhanger, right? I mean, everybody uses it.
Yes. Yeah.
What was that?
So is the Professor right? 13th is Batman 66, and the stay tuned. Is Batman really responsible for all the cliffhangers we have to put up with?
I don't know if responsible, but it's definitely important in history. I do think Cliffhanger the movie had a great intro. Bad joke. But cliffhangers, it is an important part of storytelling, and I don't think that there's many people that can pull it off successfully. Not like the books that we're going to review today. And
that's a shout. I
think one of the pitfalls of a cliffhanger, if not done right, is you could write yourself into a corner.
Perfect. That's a really good shout.
That is true. Yep.
Do you think the idea and how transitory death is in comic books? Do you think that kind of reduces the impact of a cliffhanger? Do you think, or do you think that there's other things we can do? Other kind of cliffhangers. It doesn't always have to be a life or death situation.
I think from a writing perspective, again, if you're gonna, and we'll talk about this later on, especially with my pick, that if you're gonna throw a cliffhanger in there, you better be ready for the aftermath, and it better be good or even exceed the cliffhanger you let off with.
Right.
So not only is it that you can write yourself into a corner, what can you do to top that the next issue?
Yeah,
the cliffhanger's been designed for forever as a reason for you to come back, right? Like you can't miss that next issue if you'll never know what happens. And that to me, right? Like you need to know. They use cliffhangers in TV all the time where I'll just watch one more episode and you end up binge watching the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And there, like you said, there are some people that do it really, really well. I think these batch of books that we picked, I think these are probably the 3 of the best cliffhangers in comics that they've ever. And I'm going to go out there and say it now. I think Johnny, your pick for sure.
I think mine's synonymous with cliffhangers. To be fair, it's not of that era. I think there's a couple of others that kind of can equal that, if not top that. The Dark Knight Returns issue 3, where the Joker's now dead. What comes next? That's a pretty big one.
There's definitely a lot of honorable mentions when it comes to comic book cliffhangers.
13th, do you think that Gwen off the bridge is a cliffhanger? Because it's like, from a story point of view, it's like, oh my god, what's coming next?
Yeah, not only did was that a cliffhanger, the following issue was also another cliffhanger and anticlimactic at the same time, with the death of the Green Goblin and all this trauma Spidey had to live with.
So, see, I think that of X-Men 137. To be fair, and 138.
Yeah,
I think as good as the Dark Phoenix saga is, and it absolutely is up there on anybody's top 10 lists of all time. I think the last issue, I think it's just,
Well, when we were discussing the idea for this show off the air, I mentioned the Crisis on Infinite Earths when all the other Earths were destroyed, and that's how the book ended.
Yeah.
So anybody that was familiar with DC history, you're like, wait a minute, where's Earth 2?
Who's turning out the lights?
What? Literally, who turned off the light? Yeah.
Last one out, close the door.
Could you imagine just saying that day I quit collecting comics? Like you'll never know what happens after.
It is nuts. It is one of those things. Like I said, you have to want to come back for more. Did my video just freeze?
You are frozen. Yes, you are.
Oh, what the heck happened there?
I don't know.
There's a cliffhanger.
You can still hear me, right? I mean, I wish I had my eyes open for that. What the heck?
Yeah, we can still hear. All right.
All right. Well, I'm definitely not going to leave that picture up. So,
I tell you what, let's kick you out and come back in and see if that helps.
And nope.
All right.
Re-enter.
No, there you go. Oh no! What's happened to Bud?
Will the professor remain frozen in time?
Will he return to get the lashing of my severe tongue for picking his book? There he is.
Hey, I don't know what happened. I think my camera just shut off. Like,
it's the power of the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
So
it was a cliffhanger. That was my cliffhanger ending.
Yeah, that's what we did it. Yeah. So, and if this was a Flash Gordon serial, your picture's frozen. We come back next episode and we see Bud frantically plugging the camera back in, ready to go. All right. Okay.
That's funny.
Right. So let's go into the books. Enough Valid. Let's go into the book. So first up is a rule breaker. Can't believe it. We've gone so well with the rules, and then somebody comes along and breaks the rules. And if it's not me, and it's not the 30th Crusader, the professor, step up to the plate for breaking the rules on this one.
So yes, I admit that my rule breaking, I believe, here is minor, because we have a 25-year-old rule here. So the comics aren't old, so they need to be 25 years older or older. And we are abutting right up against our own rule that we made up, with cover date of is that April of 1997, which actually this came out in November of 1996. So we're kind of so we're in May. June, July, August. So we're about 5 or 6 months off.
All right. So this is Thunderbolts. Go on,
this is Thunderbolts #1.
Yeah. So Thunderbolts #1, written by Kurt Busiek, art by Mark Bagley, inks by Vince Russell, colors by Comic and Craft Dave Nosker, letters by Joe Rosas. And I will say about this, trying to find the credits on this book was a pain in my ass. Price wise, you know what? This isn't going that much actually. #1 is currently £30 on an auction site. However,
really?
Yeah. And if I looked for it earlier, and I saw one that was the whole run for £10. Let me just check to see how that ended up.
The whole run?
Yeah. 31 issues of the whole run. So
so it was all of Bagley, Busiek Bagley, because I think Bagley left the title around that.
Yeah, so
that would make sense.
Whilst you're talking about this book, I will see if I can find this for you now. So
yeah,
Bud,
so when I was thinking about cliffhanger endings, and I was kind of had a hard time thinking about really good cliffhanger endings, and Johnny right away, boom. So I was like, oh man, I need to have something that's at least. I mean, I don't think I could beat it, but I wanted to come close. I think so. If we go back to 1997, 1996, this is a period of time where Marvel's sales on, let's be fair, they were in the crapper, so they hire their the bad boys of Marvel that all left to go form Image, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, and they hire them all to come back and work on the biggest characters that Marvel had. All the Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Fantastic Four. And they gave Captain America to Liefeld, Fantastic Four to Jim Lee. And then what do they do with all of those heroes that are now off on Counter Earth? And there's a big void to be filled. They have Busiek and Bagley come up with a brand new super team to fill the void. And you see them on the cover. Nobody really knew anything about this when it came out. You see Citizen V, who's an old Golden Age character, looks nothing like he did in the Golden Age. You have Citizen V, you have Atlas, Mach 1, Meteorite, Songbird, and Techno. No one knew who these characters were. And, you know, if you page through this book, or if you read it, they give it away, like on page 5. And when I first read it, I never even, right there. If you look,
I don't know what you mean.
yeah. That's right there. They just show them, and you could even figure out who is who just by looking at the picture. And by reading this issue, they kind of give you a recap of, hey, all the heroes had this battle with Onslaught, and now they're gone. We don't know where they went, and who is going to protect us? You know, Spider-Man. You know, he was it. Spider-Man and Daredevil. And now we have these heroes. They come in. They end up having a fight with the Wrecking Crew, which even in that fight, you see Atlas say, "But we can't fight them there." And Citizen V stops him from saying anything. But the biggest cliffhanger reveal at the end, and I've already given it away, is the fact that the Thunderbolts are not heroes. I know.
No.
Professor.
Led by Baron Zemo as Citizen V. All of these heroes who had their debut in, actually they debuted previously. I think they debuted in the Hulk. Or was that the New Warriors?
That might be New Warriors.
I think the Thunderbolts. In Thor. I think the Thunderbolts had a debut like a week or two before they showed up in issue 1, but I might be wrong. But anyway, the Thunderbolts are revealed after they're embraced by the public, and the city pretty much commits to doing whatever they want them to do. They reveal themselves as the masters of evil. Fixer, Beetle, Screaming Mimi, Goliath, Moonstone, and Zemo. I thought this was the biggest jaw drop ever. I couldn't believe even, I mean, it's 1996, 97. This is the beginning of people online talking about comics, these gigantic forums of comic book fans. I don't think anybody had this. Nobody guessed it. This was a big, huge cliffhanger ending. I think Busiek and Bagley 100%. I can't believe Marvel kept this under wraps before the issue came out, because I don't know if you guys do you remember Wizard?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
I used to be a subscriber.
This like topped the charts of the hot books for like a year, I think, when it came out, because everybody was like scrambling to get it. I'm surprised you can only get it for £30 now. So, or what's that? For like $40, $50?
Yeah, about $45 maybe.
Yeah. What did you guys think about this? Because I think certainly I think this is the biggest cliffhanger of the 90s. But
okay.
I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I thought it was an awesome book, and I'm not sad that I broke the rule to talk about
it. Sorry, not sorry. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
You come at me with sorry, not sorry. Why are you? Well, I'm beside myself. 13th. What do you think of this book? I mean, the idea of this book has been used since a couple of times.
I mean, I only read books that are 25 years or older. I'm just kidding.
Right, yeah. We'll call you back in November for your opinion then.
Well, I've always been a fan of the Masters of Evil, and honestly, as a confession, Onslaught, the event, hated Onslaught. I hated Onslaught, and it was my jumping off point for Marvel at that time. So Thunderbolts I was aware of them, but never really dug into them like that. But after reading this issue, which I found to be quite wordy and over introducing the heroes, quote unquote, I'm like, oh man. So it felt like a relief to see the Wrecking Crew in here, someone that I was a group I was familiar with. But then, yeah, to Bud's point at the end, when the Masters of Evil have been around in various incarnations, always involved with Zemo leading the team pretty much. So yeah, it was a shock to kind of see that yet again the Masters of Evil now have a much more nefarious plan. You know, one of the things they were remembered for was wrecking the Avengers mansion,
right,
in the late 270s issues or something like that, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was like in late 1986 or yeah, around 86. And the funny thing is like I was trying to think of before that. I know that was their last storyline that they were major in, but I don't remember the Masters of Evil being making any kind of appearance in between this and Thunderbolts. So this is almost 10 years later, and now they're back. So
right, and you know, some of these villains individually, you know, had their run-ins. I remember Goliath right off the bat in West Coast Avengers.
Yep.
Being a nuisance for them. The Beetle always throughout time. He's been around a very long time.
Yep.
So I think if you look at, or you know, offer the perspective of, okay, we had Onslaught. Some of the more recognizable heroes are definitely gone, at least story-wise, right? So what do you have now? So they offer the readers an awesome cliffhanger, number one, but something that they'll be familiar with, but a completely new direction, like totally new. And I think that's what made this book so popular then, that it was the talk of the town, literally. And, you know, anytime you have Zemo involved, it's definitely going to get your attention. So, yeah, art-wise, I don't know if I found it to be too strong. I think the idea and the plot are excellent, but I think the script is a little too long, and the art I'm not too sold on. But it's a good story. So.
Okay. So I mean, this is the granddaddy of the whole bad guy taking on the good guy role.
Yeah.
For at least for Marvel, you know, because I mean, this isn't Moonstone. Is it Moonstone? She was fake Captain Marvel. She was fake Miss Marvel when Osborn did exactly the same thing in Dark Avengers, right? So this isn't. This is so people are looking at this pod going, "No, Dark Avengers." It's like, get a grip. This came first, all right? So chill your boots. I agree. It is a bit wordy. I think that kind of lends itself to Busiek's writing. I think I always think of Kurt Busiek as kind of a bit of a I don't want to say B-list creator because he's not. I think he is top. But I think he's one of those ones that's more workmanlike rather than spectacular. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so.
Yeah, I think this kind of shows, it comes from that Grunwald stable. We looked at Squadron Supreme not so long ago, and that was like words on words on words on words on words. So it comes from that kind of that environment, which is fine.
Later on, I believe his Avengers work was much better. You could see that he evolved.
But I think when you work with existing characters, it's easier to have to minimize stuff down. I mean, this is, in all intents and purposes, it's number one. It's the introduction of a new superhero team. Right. You've got that. You can't just do that in like 5 panels with sparse dialogue. There's going to have to be something in there. It'd be interesting to see how the run goes. Does the dialogue become less wordy as the series goes on?
It does.
Mm-hmm.
So as familiarity breeds less words, then so be it. I will say I kind of agree with 13th on this, but Mark Bagley is not my favorite artist.
I do know, and I was conscious of that when I picked it. So.
Yeah, so not only have you picked someone I don't like art-wise, you've picked a book that's not 25 years old. So it's like, it's whammy. It's twofer.
If I could throw something in here too. So remember at this juncture, right, again, the main characters people were familiar with, right? Because books were still being sold on the newsstand, right? So when you see something like this, you're like, oh, it's a typical team trope. You get 4 or 5, 6 members. You always have a strong guy. You always have a leader, so it just seemed to fall into like a prototype team book. And you're like, well, if you look at the cover, I don't recognize anybody, so I'm just going to pass this one on by.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a fair shout as well, isn't it? I mean, so to go back to Professor's point, I guess, from before he shoots me down on this one, Bagley was probably the only superstar Marvel had left.
Well, or let's say he got moved up, right? He got their spot after they left.
Because he was on Amazing Spider-Man for ages.
He was on Amazing Spider-Man, and then, of course, he took over from Eric Larson.
Yeah.
And then Eric Larson left. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he kind of benefited at the end of the day from Image being formed because he stuck around.
And, of course, he did New Warriors as well.
Mm-hmm. He did, yeah.
Ironically, both Spider-Man and New Warriors make an appearance in this book. So, if that's your Bagley, if Bagley's your fave because of those characters, you get to see a little bit of there.
I love Bagley for New Warriors, for this book, for Amazing Spider-Man. He did so much of the artwork for so many of the books that I loved when I was younger. It's hard not to like him, I think he's one of those 90s artists, and even today, definitely recognizable. You could tell a Bagley from anything else. He's not an imitation. So
that's because everybody has a square jaw, even the women. But that's a different matter altogether. Do you have his? Do you know his first book for Marvel?
Who, Bagley?
Yeah.
I used to. What is it?
It's an Amazing Spider-Man annual, part of the Evolutionary War, where they bring a clone of Gwen Stacy back.
So
there you go. I think that's around 2021, something like that.
Oh, another little bit of Bagley trivia, maybe that you don't know, is that Bagley was the winner of the Marvel tryout book. If you remember that from back in the 80s.
I remember.
He won the Marvel tryout book contest, and that's how he got a job with Marvel.
And his prize was to draw that annual. There you go. Cool. Excellent. So I think it's funny you picked this book. because you're talking about what was the epic called that moved the heroes? Can you remember?
Heroes Reborn.
Which, of course, currently is making splashes in the current Marvel universe.
That is another reason that I picked this book for this week because of the tie-in to the present. Yes.
Amazing.
I really kind of think that they should have called it Heroes Reborn.
I mean, they could have gone Heroes Rebirth, but that wouldn't sound right.
Ooh.
No, kind of that. That's a. What did that was a Hero's Return when they came back, wasn't it?
Yes.
I just don't understand why they can't call them Heroes Rerun.
I have an idea. Let's call it Return of the Heroes.
Heroes Reborn Return. The Return of Heroes Reborn.
Why don't we just call it a Secret Civil Reborn Return War Crisis?
That is definitely a crisis.
All right, okay. Book one down. Let us take a quick break before we move on to the next two. Here's an advert. You guys love this advert. I love this advert. It's Crisis in the Toyverse. Right, there you go. Well, what a great advert. What a great advert. All right, to follow that up, we have our own epic cliffhanger. This is the 13th choice. Let me just bring it up. It's this one. So we are going with Web of Spider-Man number 31. Let me bring the picture up for you so you can all have a look at it. Boom. All right, so this is written by one of my favorite writers of all time in J.M. DeMatteis, art by Mike Zeck, inks by Bob McLeod, letters by Rick Parker, colors by Jackson, Sharon, and Zeck. 13th, it's your call, my friend. Take it away.
Where do I start?
At the beginning, hopefully.
Part one.
Yeah, part one. That's what we're doing. Yeah, part one. Tree. Yeah. I just want to talk about like this point in time, right? Like in the mid '80s, where your typical Spider-Man book, you got action, you got a lot of drama, with Peter Parker. Then that's his personal life on the hero side, but when this book came out, when I saw this cover, I'm like, oh, he's stuck in someone trapped him. But at first, the cover didn't scream to me that Kraven the Hunter was going to be involved. And then it's like you open the book and you're like, what is going on?
So, there's a naked man in my comic book.
Yeah.
Wait till I tell my mother.
Yeah, so the cover made more sense to me later on. And then obviously for the rest of the series, the covers were just incredible. They're legendary. And then you start thinking about as you read this book, man, like I never read a Spider-Man book like this in my life. This is when it came out. And even now to this day, I can say comfortably that this is one of the greatest comic book stories I've ever read, period. Great. And the script for this went through several incarnations, right, with DeMatteis, where he made pitches to Marvel and DC saying he just wanted to make a story using a coffin. He thought it was like, this is a great idea, like I'm telling you, So there's different incarnations of how the script was worked and evolved. But he was turned down. He was turned down. But the day came for him to have a story where some hero was going to get put in a coffin. And it just reminds me of like the WWE Undertaker, you know, coffin and all this stuff. But basically, it's the same idea, you know. But with Spider-Man, like, how do you make that work? You know, because Spider-Man is not that dark of a hero. You know what I'm saying? But then who's gonna do it? So the fact that Craven was tossed out there, this just put Craven from like Z-list character, a villain, to like a top-rate villain that you're just like, why? Like, this isn't the Craven I'm used to. So the opening Mike Zeck, and I don't want to miss Mike Zeck. You know, he's worked on so much good stuff. You know, Secret Wars. You know, Captain America. You know, so he knows how to draw. So the first panel right off the bat, and then the following pages, you don't need that much script. His art is telling you the story.
Yeah.
But as you keep going and you're starting to see a Craven that you've never seen before to this point. And right off the bat, DeMatteis is showing you that something is wrong with Craven, like mentally wrong. Like he's on a different level. Spider-Man at this time had just gotten married. He wasn't too far removed from getting married with Mary Jane. And I think that's also an important aspect to not just this book, but the rest of the series.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like, as she has been, you know, an anchor for Peter for many years. And finally they're married and whatnot. But the book is slowly leading you to, all right, Craven has completely lost it. He is totally insane.
He's gone. He's spider shit crazy. That's what he is.
Exactly. So
it's true.
Craven does what he does best. He hunts, and he is obsessed, like to the point he's obsessed with trying to be a better Spider-Man than Spider-Man. He hunts him down in his Craven uniform, and you know, he beats Spider-Man, and then he pulls out a rifle. Now, that moment where he pulls out the rifle on Spider-Man was new, and as a reader, you're like, I've never seen that either, like that, not like this, because Craven was always this macho guy and you know, full of himself. It was all about his ego, right? Because to this point, before this book came out, the Craven I knew from earlier comic book stories, also in like the Amazing Spider-Man Is Amazing Friends cartoon. I'm like, what a loser.
Yeah.
You know, wearing a lion vest. But here he is. He has Spider-Man dead to rights. And then he shoots him. And you're like, what is going on? Did he kill him? Or what? But the way the book ends with Craven, you know, throwing dirt over Spider-Man's coffin. And then it's, all right, see you next time. You know, this book, you know, my jaw fell to the floor after I read this countless times with this particular issue, and I just couldn't figure it out. Plus, I was shocked at Craven. I was shocked at what happened to Spider-Man. Even Spider-Man's outlook, he was a nervous wreck. But this is like an elevated nervous wreck, right? Because Peter has like a lot of anxiety sometimes, or he fights with himself, self-doubt and what have you. But this is a different level. So to me, you know, this book, without a doubt, is a legendary book. To open up, like as we said earlier, when you're using a cliffhanger and you're using it in a way like this to start off a miniseries, how do you write yourself out of this? But DeMatteis did it, and then he had Mike Zeck to help him out with the art, which is incredible. It's spot on, in my opinion, and it's just you can't come up with a, you know, at this point in time, this like changed the game for Craven the Hunter and for Spider-Man. Really, just never underestimate your villain, no matter who it is.
Yeah, I think it's a game changer for Mike Zeck, because I think up to that point, I think Mike Zeck I've just said about Kurt Busiek was workmanlike. I think Mike Zeck was kind of like a workman artist. He'd come in, he'd do an odd book here or there. Yeah, he was on Secret Wars, but it's known for a fact that because of all the shooter changes, Zeck fell behind and other people had to step in to do bits and bobs, to get it sorted. But this book is classic. His art is just gorgeous throughout the whole run. So that's cool. I see the professor nodding away there.
I'm just waiting patiently because you're all talking great stuff, and
no, go for it.
So Mike Zeck, this is the best he's ever looked. With Bob McLeod inking over him, he's never looked better. Zeck has never ever looked better than he does in this series here. Go back to that. Next to the last page where the rain is coming down, you have that big thunderclap, Krakoom, there. Look at the lighting on the second panel, because you could just, you're like, oh, the lightning flashed right there, and then it goes right back to being dark. That is storytelling right there. Just the correct mood. There was no humor in this book. Let's remember, this book came out at a time where we had the Dark Knight and everything was like, everybody was going towards dark. The Punisher was the biggest thing going at this point. And they wanted to get Spider-Man to be darker and had the black suit, and Spider-Man to me was never a character that worked in a real dark fashion. He just wasn't the type of character. And this is the first time you ever read Spider-Man that's like an actual, like a humorless comic where you actually feel like that the stakes have been raised, right? You never, I never, even to the point where the old Silver Age comic with Spider-Man holding up the collapsing build, like it was the sewers when he was fighting Doc Ock. Remember that?
Serum. Yeah, it was the radioactive serum from his Aunt May.
I never
will do it.
That was the other than before this, that was the most I've ever felt like Spidey was in danger. Here, I was like, wow, what did I just read? I think anything could happen right now. That was what made me think of this when you saw this. I'm like, yeah, but just like 13 said, how do you get out of that? And I'm not ready for this. I was like, I'm not really ready for the rest of this, because I think it's just going to be really heavy stuff, because this first issue, and it turned out to be that at the end where Kraven takes his own life. And that, to me, this is the one of the most classic Spider-Man stories that have ever been told, because no one's ever told a story like this before in Spider-Man.
Agreed.
So I thought it was fantastic. Like I said, it was very far and few between that you have creators that kind of mesh together and they come in to create something amazing. And here, DeMatteis and Zeck, they've never ever been better. They were all both on their A games, and I don't think Zeck's ever Zeck to me was always a cover artist.
I was about to say, we talk about his art being fantastic here.
Yeah,
his covers for Batman 10 Nights of the Beast, which is a 4-issue run within the Batman comics. Gorgeous covers, absolutely gorgeous.
He had some awesome Captain America covers, some awesome Punisher covers. Like that, to me, he was a cover artist. And I know that he did the interiors for Secret Wars, but I mean, that's not fantastic. Like
I would love to know how long it took him to draw that page where Kraven's in a pit of spiders and then starts to eat them.
Oh,
I don't know how long that would take, but
how psychological is that page too?
Oh yeah.
That just made me really afraid of Kraven and afraid for Spider-Man. So it's nuts. And this book made me feel a way. Like there are certain books that make you feel something. This made me feel something in the first part. So, and the other 5 parts too. The rest of this series is just as good as this first issue.
Yeah. The problem for me, if I'm going to be honest, the problem with me with this book is that directly after it, you've got Spider-Man, story-wise, you've got Spider-Man in a mental asylum, all grouped up. And then after that, it's the Cult of Love in Web of Spider-Man. And you're like, it just goes from like dark, and then the reset button comes in, it's back to all smiling, all singing, dancing Spider-Man. And I think, you know what? I think Spider-Man could work as a mature character.
No doubt.
But it needs somebody who can get into it, into the
Yeah.
psyche of it. And when you look back and read something like Faithful Symmetry or Craven's Last Hunch, you've absolutely nailed it on the head. This book is proper scary all the way through. But there are some lovely panels in later on where he goes to see Mary Jane and he just holds a hand to his cheek before he goes out because he knows this is the last battle between him and Craven. It's like, you know what? It's just, if you haven't got this book, go and dig it up because this issue, it is pricey. For a 9.6 EGC, you've got £80 for this one book. £80. I think that's quite pricey for a Web of Spider-Man book. But even the graphic novels of which, and there is a couple of hard covers out there, they're talking, you're talking £20-30 for those.
Right.
That's how popular this book is. If you can get a chance to get a copy of this book or the copy of the whole run of Faithful Symmetry or Craven's Last Hunt, get it because it is storytelling par excellence.
Yeah. Well, you say, I mean, I think it's when you say £20-30 for a hardcover, I mean, it deserves to be that. It just does. It's a great story, and you wouldn't regret spending the money on it. There are some books that I wouldn't want to spend it, but
I'm honest. I'd spend £80 for this issue. I think this issue is absolutely, I think
for sure.
It is. Anybody asks me what my favorite Spider-Man stories are, it always goes down to Craven's Last Hunt and the death of Jean DeWolf. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah.
And I get 13's point about what the night Gwen Stacy died. Yeah, that's really good. So there's your top. There's my top three. But you're talking like, when did Gwen Stacy die? 13th year.
Was it 71?
72,
like
I think.
72.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you've got to wait until the 80s to get another two great Spider-Man stories. What was going on with Spider-Man prior in that time? Just
right. I want to throw something here, like an asterisk to what you guys said earlier, where you have this dark Spider-Man, but then they tried to reset and clean it up. Let's not also forget the Soul of the Hunter was another follow-up to this because fans got them took the message wrong about what DeMatteis was doing with Craven. Like people were complaining about, you're glorifying suicide, and that wasn't his point. But Soul of the Hunter was kind of like a redemption, if you will, in a way for those panels, plus like to let Craven finally rest. So we didn't forget what happened. It's still stuck, but it was kind of a reset. And lastly, for those who wonder, in this book, right, that panel where Craven is holding a rifle to Spider-Man, to Bud's point, anything can happen. There is a what if book from volume 2, number 17. What if Craven the Hunter had killed Spider-Man? Now, the book isn't the best in the world. However, it really, what creeped me out with that book is that Craven, as we see in this book that we're talking about today, him eating the spiders, in that issue, he literally was cannibalizing Spider-Man, like eating off his body to thinking he was going to gain power. So if this Craven the Hunter thing is your story, then you might want to check those out too. So there's a plus recommendation there.
Cool, excellent. And it's funny you say that about how people didn't get the message.
Right.
J.M. DeMatteis is, for me, he's one of the best writers ever. I'll say that now. But he has a history of being misunderstood.
Yep.
There's a Star Wars book, a Star Wars comic that he wrote, The Curse of Sonny Child, I think it is. And it was an anti-war story in the Star Wars book. An editorial hated it, so they changed it. And then he quit Star Wars. He took his name off the book. He's not credited as the writer. The UK version, however, in Marvel UK, we get the original. We get how it's supposed to be. So there you go. Absolutely, a writer that's absolutely up there. He can write straight up superhero stuff. He can write fun stuff, as we saw in his Justice League stuff. He can write serious stuff like this. So there you go.
Yeah, no argument for me on that one.
Yeah, cool. All right. So, Professor alluded to it, I suppose, earlier, that my choice is potentially one of the ones, the big ones. I'm not sure I agree. Well, actually, I do agree. It is, of course. Never disagree with the Professor when he's right. There you go. It is Batman 427. Written by Jim Starlin, art by Jim Aparo, ink Mike DiCarlo, letters by John Costanza, colors by Adrian Roy. This is the granddaddy of all cliffhangers. This is, does the Joker kill Robin? Death in the Family, lovely Mike Mignola cover. Bud, I know how much you love Mike Mignola. Hashtag you don't. Sorry, not sorry. 13th starts off. Death in the Family. Ironically, this is only episode 2 of a 4-part series. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I mean, right off the bat, let's start with the creators. Jim Starlin. Once again, the name is mentioned on this. I love Jim Starlin. Right?
Man, how did I? You know, I wrote my notes. I've put in my notes. 13th loves Starlin. Right.
No doubt. And then here you have him with Jim Aparo, one of our favorite Batman artists ever.
My favorite Batman artist of all time.
Yeah, Mike DiCarlo, no slouch. And the Mignola covers for this series, I didn't like this cover too much. But book 3, that cover obviously is iconic.
Yes.
I like it because there's only half of Mignola's cover there, and the rest is just black, which is fine.
The cover design for this whole series was excellent. And again, you know, you could say it's cliche, but this is a legendary book for many reasons.
Yep.
But to keep it basic for those who have yet to read it, so spoiler alert, it involves Robin, obviously, and the title gives it away, A Death in the Family. So, but this is not the Dick Grayson Robin. So at the time, for those who weren't even familiar with what the hell was happening in DC over at DC with the Robin situation, there was a new Robin in town, and no one was too fond of this Robin, Jason Todd, right? But you know, one of the things I mention all the time with DC, at least back in this day, where you saw progression. So Dick Grayson grew up, he became Nightwing, out you go. But Batman can't be Batman without Robin, or can he? Well, guess what? Let's send him some help. Jason freaking Todd, right? No one likes this freaking kid. You know what I'm saying? He was a pain in the ass. He was a brat. He was obnoxious.
You're missing a key point. They had to redo his origin.
They had well, that was right because he came out pre-crisis with light brown hair.
Yeah,
comes back with his hair dyed after the crisis. You know, so yeah, there was some evolution there with Jason Todd. But long story short, he wasn't everybody's go-to character, right? But here we are. You have this storyline with Batman, and the premise of the story is really that Jason Todd, like Batman, was an orphan, or at least so he thought, until he found out that he may have a biological parent still alive. And that's what their mission focused on. Plus, in real life, the U.S. had very high tensions with Iran. So this also made sense where Batman was over there looking into terrorists and things like that. But, you know, the journey to get here, it was interesting because when you're reading A Death in the Family, you're like, okay, somebody's going to die, but who is it going to be? And then as you get through the book, you're like, no way. It really, you know, Jason Todd finds his mom. That's great. So you meet her, and then he's happy for once. You start to feel for this character like, man, you know, maybe he's going to turn over a new leaf and actually start listening to Batman. But would he do that? No, because he's Jason freaking Todd. That's why. So you get iconic panels here where his mom kind of abandons Jason Todd. He reunites with her, but she tells him that why she left and that she's still doing shady things, now involved with the Joker. And she sets up her own son in like the ultimate betrayal between a parent and their child.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Mother's Day. So, she offers him up to the Joker, and to me, one of the most mind and iconic panels ever with the Joker and Robin is the infamous crowbar scene. Those panels are legendary. There's no caption needed. You know what's happening. And deep down, you're like, man, I hated Jason freaking Todd, but he didn't deserve that. But if you thought that wasn't bad enough, the fact that he's there trapped with his mom with a bomb ready to go off, and he's still trying to help her, then the door is locked. And then it's like, the bomb goes off. It's like there's an earth-shattering kaboom, right? So even Marvin Martian would have noticed that from his infamous telescope. But that last panel with Batman, like as you read the story, right? Because I read this like several times in a row.
Yep.
And I'm like, Batman's like, Jason, listen to me, for God's sake, stay put. Jason, don't do this. Jason, but if you're reading Batman consistently, this was typical talk between Batman and Jason Todd, but Jason wouldn't listen. But if this was your first time reading this book, you're like, man, what an idiot. But here you are, but you almost feel for Batman. And this sets up perhaps one of the most traumatic experiences for Batman, other than the death of his parents, is the death of his partner, someone that he was really, really going way out of the way to help. And again, like this issue alone has been mined to death, with Jason Todd. So eventually, he becomes the Red Hood and all this stuff. And, but before I finish this off, there was a hotline, there was a vote, right? So we were talking about cliffhangers, like where you're at this juncture right now where the earth-shattering kaboom goes off. The readers got to decide what happened. And I don't know if anybody voted, but a vote for death. Vote for death.
I couldn't vote because it's a US only.
There is a little bit of a guilt trip, right? The vote
Did you
for
vote?
death. The vote for death.
Did you vote for death?
Of course, I hated him, but I didn't think they'd do it like this.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, oh man. What did I do?
It's all 13's fault. Oh, the last 20
I was the
years.
one vote over.
Yeah.
Be careful what you vote for.
Yeah, but in all honesty, I never liked Jason Todd.
Can you imagine?
And
Democrat, Republican, death of Jason Todd. Which one am I going to vote on?
And Machine, you know this, right? That I'm not a fan of Jason Todd, and I'm not a fan of Resurrections. But to be fair to Jason Todd, how he was brought back eventually, you got to write a really damn good story to get him out of this mess. And I think it worked, and the fans love him now because he's an anti-hero in Red Hood. But nobody knew that was going to happen. Like this was like, you don't get out of this one. And that's what you were left with. It traumatized Batman, and I think it traumatized the readers.
Okay, especially those who voted. All right, okay, so Professor, were you because you're not a huge Bat fan to start with, so was this on your radar back then?
Yes. So of course the whole hotline gimmick, this Death in the Family story was what led me to start reading Batman. Prior to this, I had not been a regular Batman fan, but when I heard that they were going to allow, have the fans were going to choose, I jumped on board. This was a jumping on board story for me for Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Hey, I wasn't a big fan before that.
Did you vote?
I did, and I voted.
Which way did you go?
I voted to not kill him because
Oh!
I wasn't familiar with the Jason Todd character. But this is why this is why this is the best cliffhanger ever, is because even the writer and even the editors didn't know which way they were going to go when this book was published, right? So that's why it could have gone either way. And from what I remember, I think that it was like 47-53. I think it was close, right?
It was closer than people expected to be.
Yeah, there was a very narrow margin. It really was.
Yeah, and that to me was wow, right? We could have gotten, and I'm sure that there's the other there's another beginning to part 3 where he actually lives, right? I'm kicking around there. I've never seen that artwork. I've never seen that, but I'm sure it's completed somewhere because they had to have it ready to go, depending on the results.
Well, if you look, it's been on Twitter a couple of times because there's a I don't have the link to hand now, so apologies for that. But there's a Jim Aparo fan page on Twitter, so if you look for that, and every now and again he shows the artwork of Batman finding Robin alive. And you're absolutely right. There was 2 make readies. There was the one where he dies, and then there's the one. And then also you got to think about this because of how far comic books are printed and published in advance. Not only was there a make ready therefore for the one where he lives, there's got to be make readies for the rest of the story.
Right.
Yes. Right. So there's got to be a make ready part 3 and a make ready part 4. Or at least half of a part 4.
And if I could jump in for a sec, Bud, to your point too. Yeah. At this, not many people knew Jason Todd, right? Yeah. When this book came out, and then the following book came out, where the vote was in and the vote was death. That book was selling like water, and to the point where, right, my dad, right, didn't care about comic books. He liked Batman 66 the show, and he was like, "Hey, Mike, when you go to the comic book store, can you see if they have that Robin dying book?" I'm like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "You don't collect comic books." He goes, "Everybody at work's talking about how Robin died." I'm like, "Dad, it was not the Robin that you knew." And he's like, "Nonsense, Robin died." But at this time, there were still people who had no idea that it was Jason Todd that died, but still significant nonetheless.
It's funny because DC got out of the hook when they introduced Tim Drake as Robin. They came into it and said Robin didn't get killed, Jason got killed. Yeah, and you can see here that when Batman's coming up to the explosion, he's not shouting Robin.
Right. No, and I think that kind of swayed the vote for life in a way, right? So people who are familiar with Batman but not like detailed familiar, well, no, we can't kill Robin. What are you, nuts?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh, and I think I even said like if this was Dick, they never would have killed him off.
Oh no, hell no,
because he too much of a beloved character. But Jason was a non-entity, I think. But so the other question I had about the book too, and maybe you guys know better, is this the first time that Joker's ever been outside of Gotham? Because that to me, like I kind of thought moving this to like Ethiopia, that's where the book took place, right? I was like, what the hell is Joker doing in Ethiopia? What I know he's stealing medical supplies, which is a big thing back in Africa, probably still even today, about black market medical supplies. But what is the Joker's motivation in here? And I've never seen Joker out of makeup. Like when I first read this book, I was like, wow, how is even? I thought that was part of him. I thought that was his skin. I never thought that he was putting makeup on every time he was going to commit crime.
Well, it is his skin, but he's putting makeup to cover the white skin.
A la Jack Nicholson.
Okay, but in the heat in Africa, you'd think that wouldn't have melted
really,
off.
Really?
I don't know. Just saying. I'm being a jerk. But but the thing was I just don't think Joker has motivation outside of Gotham City. And
the idea to answer your question is the Joker had to lay low. He was in part 1 of this book. Batman's all over the place. Something about a nuclear warhead going missing, and Bats, Joker has to lay low basically. So he goes like to the furthest reaches away from Gotham that he can get to, and of course he wants to sell the nuclear warhead to the bad guys.
Yeah, as long as it fits the story, I'm cool with it. But if I just like reading this in a vacuum, I was like, that kind of threw me a bit. Like, it's a coincidence that any part of the world you go to, Batman meets up with the Joker.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk coincidences, how is it Batman always turns up in the same country Bruce Wayne visits? But
right. And then the fact that Jason Todd's mom is involved in trying to, like you said, involved with medical supplies.
Yeah.
It just happens to be with the Joker, and then the lady ends up being Jason Todd's mom. What are the odds of that?
In comic book law, it's 100%, and that's where we're going to leave it. All right.
But I want to say that iconic, the iconic crowbar scene, that is the one I've never seen. That's the first time I ever saw Joker act so brutally, and I think I think this paved the way for it to be okay for him to shoot Barbara in The Killing Joke. So
that's an interesting question. Which came first? I think if I'm going with Killing Joke was first.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe
Barbara. I don't know. Killing Joke or interesting. Killing Joke came out in 1988. The Death in the Family came out
1988.
Oh man, it's going to be a close run thing.
Oh, so these two stories came out within months of each other?
Yep. Let's just see.
So in this case, we can't even argue like what came first, because they might have been written before each other but came out separate. So
well, in fairness, right, with Robin, with Jason Todd, this was in continuity for sure. Killing Joke was a debate on whether or not it was going to be in continuity or not, right? And some people at the time credited that book as an Elseworlds, like something outside of continuity.
All right, okay. So I'm just trying to get a publication date. Right, publication date, March 88 for Killing Joke, Death in the Family publication date was later that year. It's around November time. So
okay, all right.
So I think but it's an interesting point because there is another continuity kind of glitch in this idea, in this story, in that the death of Jason Todd had been preordained by Frank Miller in The Dark Knight Returns, which came out at least 18 months before this.
That's correct. Right.
So in The Dark Knight Returns, there's a casket of a tube with the Robin suit in, and it's Jason. Jason was a good soldier. So, the idea of Jason being killed was already in DC editorial mind. This is just a great way of trying to close that circle and go all the way around. But really great points when you think about it, that in that 2-year period, they hinted at the death of Jason Todd, they crippled Batgirl, and then they killed Jason Todd for real. All right? And let's be honest, Jason Todd stayed dead a hell of a long time.
Right.
For a comic book character. Personally, I think he should have stayed dead because he has more.
Agreed.
He has more impact as a failure of Batman than he does as a Red Hood anti-hero. And I get it. People will say, he's still a failure because he's not part of the Bat family. He's running against the rules and stuff. But you know what? No, failure should be failure.
No, as a diehard reader for all those decades that Jason Todd was buried, or whatever you want to call it, like you said, there was even a dedication to Jason Todd in the Batcave. You got a reminder in almost every Batman issue, regardless of title, of where you see in the Batcave with the old Jason Todd Robin uniform. It was his failure in front of his face every freaking day, and that led to his kind of apprehension with taking on new partners, at least for a while.
So we can talk about death in comics, and I think with DC anyway. has this long history of legacy heroes that I think that they can get away with killing some of these major characters and just put someone else in the suit and you're all good. The only ones they really can't kill off is Superman and Batman, and even then they can replace them for a while. But I mean, Barry Allen was dead forever after Crisis, and same thing with Kara, Supergirl. She was dead forever after, you know.
Yeah.
But everybody comes back eventually, and that's, you know, one of the things I actually liked about DC in the 90s was that they didn't try to roll out Barry, you know, or they kept Hal Jordan dead for a while in Green Lantern, you know.
And this kind of belabors the point at the start of the show. Cliffhangers, if they're involving death, do they work? And the answer is, as the professor said, if they're done right, and they feel like there is closure. Because at the time, let's look back. The death of the Phoenix, the death of Jean Grey. At that point, there were no plans to bring her back.
Right.
At the death of Jason Todd, there were no plans to bring him back. Yes, they brought Robin back, but they didn't bring Jason Todd back. It's somebody has to come up with this idea.
Yeah.
Right, and it also elevated the rivalry between the Joker and Batman. This was a new level now. So, you know, if you thought Joker was a clown, but now you're for sure, if this issue will convince you that this dude is nuts. And now Batman, it's like he was just given a tool or a mechanism to say, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch for killing my partner. Look what he did to me. And he still doesn't do it. So to talk about what you said earlier, Machine, with the Dark Knight Returns, where, you know, ultimately it ends in death for the Joker. But, you know, and they talk a lot about the relationship between Joker and Batman throughout the years. In continuity here, this changed the game for many, many years. And it's a stark reminder, too, not just for Batman of his failure, but for the future Robins. When they were walking in that Batcave, like Tim Drake, and he's staring at that Robin casing, like I'm gonna listen to Batman.
And you know what? I thought Tim Drake was a way better Robin than Jason ever was, and so at that point, when they started bringing Jason Todd back as the Red Hood, I was like, why? Because you have Tim Drake, who's a better Robin. And Jason Todd was a reminder of Batman's failures, which is why he's working to be a better Batman, you know? And I just thought there was having to bring that back was, I guess, I don't know, it worked against my fandom for Batman for a while, but whatever, you know, there are fans of the Red Hood, so
yeah, I mean, am I in love with the plot that when they brought him back? No, but how else would you bring him back? You know what I'm saying? So it made sense.
Well, again, when it comes to Jason Todd, he has more lives than a cat.
Yeah.
So again, he comes back two different ways. So he comes back because Superboy Prime punches the universe.
Right.
Or in the retcon, he gets rescued and dipped in the Lazarus pit.
Right.
So not only does he have two origins, he has two resurrections. He's like, what's going on there? All right, so that's it. Boy. We're out. Okay, so there's a couple of there's three great cliffhangers for you. Cliffhangers are part of comic book staples. Yes, characters don't stay dead, apart from Uncle Ben, and let's keep it that way. All right? But if it's done right, a cliffhanger does add weight to the story. You know, the mainstream characters, we know they're going to be all right in the end, but still, you know. Professor, I'm going to forgive you for breaking the rule on that one. Thunderbolts was an interesting choice. I'll let you off on that one. 13th, good pick with the Web of Spider-Man book, and of course, Death in the Family with my fan favorite artist of all time, Jim Aparo for Batman, and a book that has more coincidences than whatever a collection of coincidences is. Go check them out. They're all in trades. You can get them. You can get the originals. The Thunderbolts book is around £15, so it's not massively expensive. And you can see how it was done the first time correctly before Dark Avengers, as we mentioned earlier. All right, excellent. So that's it. We're out of the show. Don't forget, check out the UCPN for all your favorite podcasts, including Professor.
A no prize podcast, all about no prize, all about Marvel Comics. Whoops, wasn't prepared for that.
All right, and of course the Definitive Crusade, which is all about your DC books. All right, okay. So enjoy the rest of your days. Enjoy your comic book collections, and this is adios from the machine. Bye.